Welcome to Audit Archive, where we run you through some of the most questionable and rather atrocious police encounters. Today, we're looking at a case where an officer detained a couple and physically assaulted them numerous times for no reason at all. On February 12, 2023, Officer Kyle Howe of the Toledo Police Department was out on patrol duty when he spotted a vehicle speeding on the highway. Officer Howe then pursued the vehicle with his emergency lights activated and pulled the driver over shortly after. The driver here is Isaias Romero, a father and a resident of Toledo, Ohio. Upon making contact with Mr. Romero, Officer Howe alleged that Mr. Romero was driving at a speed of 77 miles per hour, which was above the legal speed limit. In Ohio, the maximum speed limits on rural freeways and urban freeways are 70 miles per hour and 65 miles per hour respectively. In this situation, since Mr. Romero was on an urban freeway, he was presumably going 7 miles per hour above the legal speed limit. Following this, Officer Howe demanded Mr. Romero's driver's license and proof of insurance. Mr. Romero complied and provided Officer Howe with his license, but told Officer Howe that his insurance card was back at his apartment, which was very close by.
Good evening. What's the hurry tonight?
Nothing. I just picked up my girlfriend from work.
Okay. Do you know how fast you were going?
75 maybe.
Okay. I did 77. You got your driver's license, insurance?
I do.
After Officer Howe looked at Mr. Romero's driver's license, he also asked for the passenger's ID. However, it is to be noted that according to the Ohio Revised Code, Section 2921.29, no person who is in a public place shall refuse to disclose the person's name, address, or date of birth when requested by a law enforcement officer who reasonably suspects either of the following. 1. The person is committing, has committed, or is about to commit a criminal offense. 2. The person witnessed any of the following. A. An offense of violence that would constitute a felony under the laws of this state. B. A felony offense that causes or results in or creates a substantial risk of serious physical harm to another person or to property. Taking this into account, it goes without saying that the passenger, named Jasmine, who is Mr. Romero's girlfriend, was not legally obligated to provide Officer Howe with her ID. Regardless, Miss Jasmine displayed her work ID anyway.
Okay. Does she have an ID?
She does.
Can you use my music?
This is her.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
I just picked her up from work.
Yeah.
Immediately after Miss Jasmine showed Officer Howe her work ID, he asked Mr. Romero to step out of his vehicle so he could talk to him. Generally, courts have ruled that if an officer asks if you wish to step out of your vehicle during a traffic stop, you could rightfully disagree, but if an officer lawfully orders you to step out, then you have to comply. In an article published by Christopher Hawk, a retired police officer who served in Illinois for 26 years, he stated that no laws are broken if the officer says, "Would you mind stepping out of the car, ma'am?" and you say, "No, thank you." Adding that if an officer orders you out of the car and you refuse, you can be arrested for refusing to obey an officer's lawful order. The specific crime will depend upon the local statute's verbiage, but it will probably be something like disobeying a peace officer or obstructing a peace officer. As made evident by the body cam footage, Officer Howe asked if Mr. Romero could jump out and talk to him. It's important to note that this was a request, not an order. Therefore, Mr. Romero was well within his rights to simply refuse and stay inside his vehicle to speak with Officer Howe. However, Mr. Romero complied anyway and agreed to step out of his vehicle.
Can I have you jump out so I can talk to you real quick?
That's fine.
As Mr. Romero stepped out, it appeared that Officer Howe noticed something fall out from the vehicle. Immediately after this, Officer Howe asked Mr. Romero to place his hands behind his back and then proceeded to place him in handcuffs. Amidst this, Officer Howe told dispatch over the radio that PDP fell out of Mr. Romero's pocket. What Officer Howe was referring to is an abbreviation of possession of drug paraphernalia. With reference to Ohio Revised Code, Section 2925.14, the use or possession of drug paraphernalia is a misdemeanor that is punishable by a jail sentence, fines, and more. In this case, a weed pipe fell out of the vehicle as Mr. Romero stepped out, and this is indeed drug paraphernalia, since it's explicitly identified as one under Ohio law.
What's that, partner?
I'm not sure what happened.
Okay. I'm gonna have you turn and put your hands behind your back for me, okay?
Oh, really?
Yeah. $45 detained. Alright. That comfortable for you or not?
Dash cam footage from Officer Howe's patrol vehicle better illustrates the moment when Mr. Romero stepped out of the vehicle. While placing Mr. Romero in handcuffs, Officer Howe can be seen using his flashlight to identify the pipe that fell out. Officer Howe then informed Mr. Romero that he was not being arrested for anything, but rather detained at that moment. He also asked Mr. Romero when he last smoked, referring to his recreational use of marijuana. In Ohio, the laws surrounding the use of marijuana are rather confusing, and it's often misunderstood as to what's considered criminal and what's not. The fact is that under Ohio law, recreational marijuana is legal, but possession is not always criminal. If you are caught in possession of less than 100 grams, about 3.5 ounces, it is considered a minor misdemeanor and you can face a $150 fine. Usually, however, a minor misdemeanor won't become part of your criminal record. Despite Mr. Romero's denial of smoking that night, Officer Howe requested that he take a field sobriety test to confirm he was not under the influence of marijuana. Without hesitation, Mr. Romero agreed to the test, expressing his confidence in the results.
Alright, so you're not under arrest this time, you're just being detained, okay?
That's fine.
Alright, just have you stand here in front of the car. Okay, so when was the last time you smoked?
A couple days ago.
Why would you have that in your pocket? You smoked a couple days ago.
I didn't smoke right now.
Okay, when was the last time you smoked?
I said a couple days ago.
Okay, you willing to do field sobriety testing for me?
That's fine.
After this, Officer Howe told Mr. Romero that he was being placed under arrest for driving on a barred license. In other words, Mr. Romero's license was already suspended at the time, and as a result, he was not eligible for driving. In the state of Ohio, a driver's license may be barred for certain traffic violations, criminal convictions, and civil matters. Some examples include 1. The conviction of driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol. 2. The refusal to take an alcohol test in violation of the state's implied consent laws. 3. The conviction of reckless driving. 4. Acquiring too many traffic violation points for traffic tickets. Or 5. The failure to pay child support. Regardless of the reason behind the suspension of a license, driving becomes illegal unless the license is reinstated. Under Ohio law, driving on a suspended or revoked license is a misdemeanor in Ohio. In many instances, the conviction will be, more specifically, a first-degree misdemeanor. First-degree misdemeanors carry up to 180 days in jail and a maximum fine of $1,000. Convicted motorists might also face an additional period of suspension or revocation.
Alright. Got anything on you gonna poke or stick me? Do you know you have a bar driver's license? What's that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep.
By this point, nothing appears to be disorderly or unusual. The occupants of the car have conveniently complied with Officer Howe, and the officer himself does not appear to have malicious intent. However, things take a very dangerous turn when Officer Howe and Mr. Romero engage in a conversation, where Mr. Howe argued that a weed pipe fell out of Mr. Romero's pocket, but Mr. Romero claimed that it was not in his pocket to begin with. As this went on, Officer Howe suddenly grabbed Mr. Romero's arm and pulled him for no apparent reason. The body cam footage suggests that Officer Howe grew impatient with Mr. Romero's disagreement and went on a power trip to assert dominance over Mr. Romero. Due to Officer Howe's aggressive demeanor, Mr. Romero felt visibly uncomfortable and requested that the officer refrains from using forceful physical contact. In particular, Mr. Romero explicitly asked Officer Howe not to grab him in an aggressive manner. Right after this, Officer Howe grabbed Mr. Romero once again, but this time violently slammed him onto the hood of the patrol vehicle and pinned him down. While doing this, Officer Howe can be heard telling Mr. Romero to stop with the attitude, which simply implied that the reason Officer Howe used force was just because Mr. Romero asked him to stop being aggressive. As a natural response to this unfair treatment, Mr. Romero retaliated and questioned Officer Howe's actions. To this, Officer Howe pulled Mr. Romero and threw him to the ground, displaying yet another instance of excessive and unnecessary force. While pinning Mr. Romero down, even though he showed no signs of resistance, Officer Howe told him to stop with the attitude once again. Officer Howe then continued to physically assault Mr. Romero while he was on the ground.
Alright. So you got anything on you gonna poker stick me then?
No.
Okay, I just don't want you to catch a felony up at the jail, okay?
That's fine, I ain't worried about it.
Well, you obviously had that in your pocket, and I don't want you to catch a felony up there.
Well, I don't have anything else in my pocket.
Okay.
That wasn't even in my pocket, so
Where was it at?
I don't know.
Well,
Hey, don't be grabbing me like that, man. Come on.
Oh, what the? Stop. Stop. Attitude. Stop.
What are you doing? I'm not doing nothing to you. I'm not doing nothing to you.
Stop.
I'm not doing anything.
Stop.
You're man, come on.
Stop.
Nah. You just hit me out of nowhere. Hey, the camera.
Stop.
You just hit me out of nowhere.
Luckily, this entire ordeal was caught on the dash cam too, and it leaves us with no doubt that Mr. Romero was essentially assaulted by Officer Howe, who had no lawful reason to do so.
Hey, what the Hey! Stop. No!
While Mr. Romero was on the ground, Officer Howe started to accuse him of resisting and alleged that he had tried to kick Officer Howe, and that was why he was thrown to the ground. However, with reference to the dashcam footage, it becomes clear that Mr. Romero did not try to kick Officer Howe at all. Even if we give Officer Howe the benefit of the doubt and assume that Mr. Romero attempted to kick him, it could still be argued that Officer Howe used excessive force by pinning Mr. Romero to the hood of the patrol vehicle. This aggressive action was what initiated the altercation, and Officer Howe did not provide a valid explanation for why he resorted to violence. Therefore, his use of force was unnecessary and unjustified.
Stop resisting.
I'm resisting.
You tried to kick
I'm resisting. I never touched you or nothing. You just fucking whacked me. I was restrained.
You tried to kick me.
I was restrained.
What are you doing right now?
I'm restrained, man.
Stop.
What are you doing, man? You're making me extra. You're making unnecessary fucking heels, man.
Stop.
No, I'm not doing nothing. What am I doing?
As this went on, another officer arrived on the scene and was immediately ordered by Officer Howe to place Miss Jasmine under arrest also. Now, this was an unlawful order, as Miss Jasmine had evidently done nothing wrong. In fact, she did not even step out of the vehicle throughout the entire ordeal. According to the law office of Jordan Marsh, the police can only arrest you when they have probable cause to do so. Reasonable suspicion is enough to justify detaining you, but not enough to arrest you. It's also stated that whether an officer can detain or arrest you depends entirely on the situation. But in any case, the officer must meet constitutional standards before denying your liberty. Otherwise, you've been the victim of unlawful detention or a false arrest. Therefore, it becomes pretty clear that Miss Jasmine was subjected to unlawful detention and false arrest. She was placed in handcuffs by the second officer, and meanwhile, Officer Howe did not stop with his violent demeanor and can also be seen swinging at Mr. Romero's face a couple times.
Stand up!
I'm being serious! What are you doing?
Rest her too.
What are you doing?
Get up! Stop resisting!
Man!
Stand up!
Hey!
After Mr. Romero stood up, Officer Howe decided that his violence was not enough just yet and proceeded to slam Mr. Romero back to the ground for the second time. As unbelievable as it sounds, Officer Howe still claimed that Mr. Romero was resisting. However, thanks to the dashcam footage, it's evident that Mr. Romero was asking for the second officer's help as he was being violently treated by Officer Howe. One could argue that it was not unruly of Mr. Romero to retaliate against unlawful and excessive force. To make matters worse, Officer Howe displayed hostility toward Miss Jasmine too, aggressively pulling her away to secure her inside a patrol vehicle.
Please, man! Man, please!
Stop! Pussy! Stop
Baby, please stop! Man, please! Why are you pulling on me like that?
While Mr. Romero was still on the ground, Officer Howe told the second officer that Mr. Romero allegedly tried to kick him and also run away from him. At this point, we know very clearly that both these claims were false.
Pulling away from me and trying to kick me as it is.
Why the did you hit me and slam me on the ground that many times?
Regardless, Mr. Romero was taken to the second patrol vehicle, while Officer Howe aggressively yelled at the top of his lungs, telling Mr. Romero to stop talking and blatantly saying that he had no freedom of speech. One would expect that after all of what happened, Officer Howe would now finally be more orderly and truthful as to what had happened. However, that was not the case. After securing Mr. Romero, Officer Howe walked up to his patrol vehicle and yelled at Miss Jasmine while calling her bogus multiple times. He even implied that Miss Jasmine was being disorderly by watching him fight Mr. Romero and doing nothing about it, which isn't disorderly at all, as Miss Jasmine had no right to step in or do anything about it. And it's pretty obvious that she would have been cited by Officer Howe for doing that anyway. Miss Jasmine was eventually asked to drive the car home, but when Officer Howe inquired about the weed pipe, Miss Jasmine said it was not hers. Amidst this, the second officer located another piece of drug paraphernalia, which led to her arrest. Ultimately, both Mr. Romero and Miss Jasmine were arrested. Now, it goes without saying that Mr. Romero and Miss Jasmine did violate the law, but that did not give law enforcement the right to mistreat them at all. In fact, this entire ordeal could have been dealt with calmly, with no escalation.
Is this your pipe?
No,
Whose is it?
I don't know.
Well, it's in the car with you. He said it's not his.
There's a grinder behind the seat. Whose is that? It's pink.
Oh, man.
That's not mine.
That's not yours? Is he going to have your DNA on it?
I don't know.
Okay, turn around and put your hand on your back. You're under arrest for possession of drug paraphernalia.
Mr. Romero and Miss Jasmine did not take any legal action against the Toledo Police Department after the ordeal. However, another traffic stop initiated by Officer Howe a month later in March 2023 led to an investigation after the media outlet KCGR published a video of the latter incident where Officer Howe was accused of using excessive force once again. The investigation report also took into account Mr. Romero's arrest. The incident was phrased in a rather inaccurate manner, stating that Romero was placed over the hood of Howe's patrol car, at which time Sergeant Howe asserts Romero attempted to kick him, leading Sergeant Howe to take Romero to the ground in an attempt to control him. A short time later, Romero returns to his feet and is then taken to the ground again by Sergeant Howe. Based upon Sergeant Howe's concern, Romero may break away from him and enter the roadway. As a result, Officer Howe was initially placed on administrative leave and then later resigned on April 24, 2023, to presumably escape the consequences that he might have had to face. Be sure to check out our previous video, where we cover another outrageous police encounter